when I read a script of a film, my main goal is just to enjoy doing so, to think of the film in my head and pick out the moments that resonate with me. What are the messages I like? What do I pick up upon reading it a second time? That really is more valuable than any more technical deconstruction that you can do, because what you're doing as a writer, I think, is just finding out what your taste is and what messages hit you the most, I think. What should you look for when you're reading a script? What's the film exploring? What is it asking? How does it set about answering it? What is the question that you're proposing? And how does the story answer that question? It probably will answer it in several different ways, leading somebody to create their own conclusion if it's a good story, I think. How are the characters introduced and what does that tell you about them? What's the inciting incident? The inciting incident is the event that sets off the story. In Jaws, it would be like when somebody is eaten by the shark, then the whole story starts, because then they have to do something about it. In Devil Wears Prada, that's where she gets that job as the assistant. In Alien, it's when they take that alien back into their, whatever it's, spaceship, Inciting incident's what sets off the story. It should happen in the first scene if possible. It should happen as early as possible. There might be a bit of introduction characterization going on, but in order to hook somebody into the story, inciting incident should be as early as possible. What ways does the writer trust us to understand what's happening without spelling it out? You might have heard show, don't tell. How is the film showing you what's happening without going, by the way, he's a really bad guy and what he's doing is not good, you shouldn't like him and be wary of him, How's it going, I don't like what you did there, How's it letting you pick up what's going on rather than telling you? By the end of the story, have the characters changed? They should have. In almost all stories they will. It's like the point of a narrative arc, I would say. How did they change and in what ways does that relate to the story's message? These are questions that you might want to have in the back of your head, but when I think about reading and writing, I tend to think about better or worse. Like what would be a better way to go about things? What would be a worse way to go about things? Rather than, oh my god, I forgot to check for the inciting incident. I failed at reading that script. That's not really a helpful way to go about doing this process. What I really like, what I think I learned from the most, are there any differences between what appeared in the script and what's in the final film? And why do you think this is? What did they set off to make? And what did they ultimately make? And why did they decide to cut those bits out? Were they boring? Did they not relate to the story they ultimately told? And so on. What did they learn about those bits that they cut that they no longer needed? If you go to scriptslug.com, that's where you can find scripts for screenplays for all different kinds of films. As far as I can tell, it's legitimate. Film scripts go online for various reasons. They go online around awards season so that most people can read them. And I don't know, I mean, a lot of filmmakers think that if they've made their film, it can't be destroyed by reading a script. A lot of them don't think that, they don't understand why anyone would be interested in reading a script. But if you're making a film yourself, if you're a filmmaker yourself, you probably want to know what they set out to do. Some films, of course, don't really have scripts either. Curb Your Enthusiasm. Any Curb Your Enthusiasm fans? None at all.
What is it?
You've got to watch Curb Your Enthusiasm. It's a comedy series with Larry David, the guy who made Seinfeld. It's just about him and his life and the people that he annoys. But each scene is just set off with an objective. Like, she's going to learn, like my wife has to learn in this film that I didn't bring her back, in the scene that I didn't bring her back the flowers that I was going to give her. So he arrives home with no flowers and then the wife's, hey, I thought you were going to give, they just improvise it essentially. And so each scene doesn't have God, you've got to say this and you've got to walk over there and pick up the plant pot and everything. It doesn't have those directions. It's just do what you want, but by the end of the scene this has to have happened. Because these scripts that I've made, of course, I've always got the understanding that I'm going to be in the room and that they're for me to understand what I was doing. So they're not really, they're not professional in a sense. They're just directions for me. Each script has to serve a purpose, and if you're improvising, you don't need a script. I watched a film recently called Drinking Buddies by this guy Joe Swanberg, who started off as like an indie filmmaker, and this was his first big Hollywood film, and he was going around looking for money, and they were like, all right, well, let's have a look at your script. He was like, I don't do that. I've just got a page long outline of what this film is going to be. and he stuck with that and it worked, you know, but it was tough. So it really depends on what people are, on directorial style, right, and what somebody's trying to achieve with the film. Secrets and Lies is a film from the 80s. I think it won some Oscars, but that was just purely improvised. The first short film I did was really tiny, and it was just a series of rejection letters I received, so it didn't really need a script. I knew the order of them. I wasn't going to forget it. There was no script, so you never know. This is something I did. Has anyone seen the film Up in the Air? I love that film.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah, I really love it. So I reread the script recently, and as I was doing it, I just did a little diagram, and this is the diagram I came up with in the end. For those of you who haven't seen the film, it's about a guy who is employed to fire people, like en masse in different companies, or make them redundant or something.
Yeah,
right?
George Clooney and Anna Kendrick. Yeah, saw it.
Yeah, I've seen it. It's a good one, right? Yeah, I really like it. So essentially, this guy kind of feels like he loves his life up in the air. He flies around a lot. He doesn't really have a home. He doesn't have any connections, and he loves that lifestyle. And it also kind of feeds into the job that he does because he has to fire people. So he has to be able to be disconnected. Otherwise, it would drown you in emotions if you were a different type of person. So the film kind of starts off, I think, showing that this guy is really enjoying his life. This guy Ryan, he meets this woman Alex on one of his trips, and he finds that she's just really like him in the same way. They both really love getting rental cars and good hotel deals and frequent flyer miles and things, really silly things that nobody else understands, so they think they have a really deep connection, and it seems to reinforce the lifestyle that he has. I'm not going to spoil it, don't worry. I would highly recommend you watch it. Then Natalie comes into the job, that's Anna Kendrick's character. She's much younger than Ryan, who I think is, it's George Clooney, so he's like middle-aged, and she has this overhaul of the company. She's going to get them all to fire people, but they're going to do it over video, over Skype. They're not going to go to the offices anymore. It's going to be a huge saving for the company, and she's young and she thinks she's cracked it. So then to learn the ropes, Ryan and Natalie go flying around the world, and she has to try and fire people face to face, and that creates lots of conflict. It creates conflict between these two characters because they have different styles. There's an apparent relationship between these two because they seem to have similar lifestyles. And all these are like subplots. Alex, this woman that he meets, she has her own relationship in life, and there's a subplot of what these two characters learn from each other. The same here. These two characters meet and they learn from each other, and the story is brought out through the conflict between these three characters and the different way that they live their life. Also, there's all these things going on. Brian wants to fly 10 million miles. He has a motivational speaking thing. So basically, I do this because I want to know how much plot do you need to fill like a feature film, and so you need like. This is a particularly dense and very well done screenplay, but you need like subplots for these two characters and like 5 different things going on for the main character. And you just set them up and see how they all progress, essentially. And then I wrote down some things about the themes: maturity versus youth, revealed through these two characters, connectedness versus disconnectedness. These two again, the different ways that they emote towards the difficult job that they do. The purpose and privilege of travel, because Ryan wants to get 10 million miles flight, which is a really silly goal when you think about it, compared to he goes to Jim and Julia's wedding, and these two can't afford to travel. So they ask everyone they know to get pictures around the world. So he starts to see that it's a real privilege that he has, that he's turned into this weird arbitrary little numbers game. And the meaning of work, what does he get out of his job? Why does Natalie find it tough as a younger person? How do any of us really go about our jobs, and what do we get out of them? So this is like just a thing I invented myself because this is how I think about things. Over time, I've for those of you who don't know, I'm a published author. I have short stories published in cool places and a bunch of stuff shortlisted that I've got fingers crossed about. But that's always the case. I've always got my fingers crossed. But I basically just taught myself, and I think that anyone who writes, even if it is like documentary filmmaking or whatever it is, there still has to be a story there, right? There still has to be a story structure, a purpose to each scene being in the order that it's in, and the person who's putting those scenes in that order has to have their own personal understanding of how they're doing that. So you can read as many books as you want, but really you're developing an individual story style, I think, and in order to do that, you primarily have to teach yourself. So this is just something I did. I'm absolutely fine if this means absolutely nothing to nobody here. It may well do, but it helps me, and all I've really done to learn is read the other ways that other people teach themselves and see and take from that what works. It's an endless process. There's no point where you go, all right, I'm done. I know everything I need to know as a writer. Just want to write, you know. I'll put this PowerPoint in a box where you can all read it. Again, this is the list of scripts that I've really enjoyed and learned from. It could be absolutely meaningless. You could hate all these scripts, and that's absolutely fine. Because the point is that you find scripts that you like. I think that all of us are done a disservice at school because you only ever learn like 1 or 2 books, and it tends to be like what the teachers have in a bucket or something. How that relates to you. I think a lot of people come away from stories and like learning from school because they're just like, I never really found anything that resonated with me. And that's fine. I think unless you find work that resonates with you, you can't learn. And if you're an adult learning this stuff for yourself, you deserve to find stuff that you really enjoy. Here's some ideas you can use to deconstruct films. Like I say, I've been using DaVinci Resolve, which is like a video editing software. It's Adobe Premiere or something, probably you get all the same features, but I found that in DaVinci Resolve there's a feature called scene cut detection. So essentially you can take a file of a film, dump it in DaVinci Resolve, right click it, do detect scenes, and it will cut the film into the different scenes, and you will get to see the length of them, the order of them, and then you can start to think about why they were put in that order and what each piece is telling you, because somebody spent half a year or longer getting those scenes, the length that they are, the order that they are, for a reason. What is that reason? You can find out and ask that to yourself using DaVinci Resolve or Adobe Premiere if that's your thing. Another tip I heard is to take a note every time a sound effect appears in a film, because again, somebody put that there deliberately. Most of the time, unless it's like a background ambient noise thing, somebody put in a sound effect for you to hear. What is it doing? Is it creating atmosphere? Is it to indicate something? What purpose does that sound serve? Because they say that film is half video, half audio. What is the audio part doing? If that's, they recommend that for like Pixar films, right? Because all those sounds are artificial. Every single sound was put in there. Why? That's a question you could ask if you're interested. Jewel is like a Steven Spielberg film. I've never seen it before, but I heard that if you play it at 4 times speed, you can just look at it and see what the story is. I'd be fascinated to know if that's the case. I've not done that yet. But it would be an interesting exercise to see how a story is shown visually, because of course when it comes to film, it's not just, you can't just write it, it's not just what people say, it's also what they're doing. So it's the images that are chosen to be shown. Like I say, scriptslug.com is the best resource I've found so far for screenplays. Scroll through that, you will find a film that you've enjoyed, click on it, read the screenplay, see how it looks. Look for the plot, setting, characterization, inciting incident. David Mamet is a playwright turned like screenwriter. Then he recently did a novel as well. Glengarry Glen Ross. Does anyone know that one? Yeah. That was one of his. He says every scene should be able to answer 3 questions: who wants what from whom, what happens if they don't get it, and why not. I've never asked those questions about any scene I've written. But the point is that there are many different ways to look at it, and you find the way to look at it that resonates with you, and that's the one you use. And you adapt it, and you keep learning and keep adding to that. Maybe those 3 questions would help somebody. I've never done it myself. Then you can look at any of the scripts I've shared in the club versus the films that we made. What did we do right, wrong? What did we keep, cut out, and why? What should we have cut? What should we have added? Like I say, you can take the script for that film that I showed, take a look at it and go, what was he trying to do? How well did he do it? That's for you to decide. Okay. Then, if you're interested in stories, because a lot of the people who RSVP'd to these events, they were interested in like writing stories as well, short stories, novels, this kind of thing. You can learn from any kind of story, and there's a big overlap between different disciplines. There's an overlap between short story writing and script writing and so on. It's all essentially the same thing: order of events, plot setting, characterization, and so on. It's just that in a story you have to convey the entire thing in words, you can't use sounds and video and so on. But it's exactly the same principle over and over. So if storytelling is more of your thing, there's websites, Everyday Fiction and Daily Science Fiction, that will send you a story to your inbox every day. It's 1,000 words or less. It has to have beginning, middle, and end and everything, because if any word is superfluous at such a short length, you really notice it. So that's story condensed. Every day you can read one of those, takes 5 minutes, and that's just a thing you do, you know. You can read some famous short story authors. I really like these. For the most part, short story authors, again, they really have to focus on story. There can't be any superfluous material in the same way that there is in novels. People can ramble on for pages in novels about how great it is to drink tea in a fantasy world because it's a special kind of tea that they designed, and people enjoy reading it for living in these books in a way that you can't really live in a short story. It has to just deliver the story to you for the most part. And if somebody's a very famous short story author, it's 99% of the time because they tell stories really well. They get the order right, they get the scenes right, and all of that. Yeah, that's why I say the story structure has to be there. It's a less forgiving and more transparent storytelling format at such a short length. Not screenplays saying stuff is relevant. Read 1,000 books and your words will flow like a river is a quote that's often attributed to different people. But practice makes perfect at anything, doesn't it? So that's the reading part that says deconstruct it. How do you write them? What's supposed to go in a screenplay? What is necessary to show in order to convey the story is one interpretation. What has to be in each image, what sound has to be there, what do people have to say in order for us to get the story delivered to us. That means that in a screenplay, if you mention any prop or character description or piece of dialogue, people will assume it has to be there for the story to progress, and rightly so, they have the right to assume that. It's not, you can't be so descriptive as you can be in a short story or a novel, because this is like a document for different departments. So far it's just been like a short team of us doing all these different roles. But say that this was like a script that I've written that somebody else was going to use, well then, if I'd put in, you know, all of these interesting things that I imagined a character doing, that wandering about, grabbing a piece of like a cup of coffee and looking at the window, somebody would assume all of that information is essential and has to be done, and then they have to procure coffee and a cup and everything. It's also, you know, motivations. If I say, I wouldn't really in a script write, you know, at this point he thinks, what the hell am I doing here? Because that's for an actor to decide, and they may interpret it in a different way from you. You would be stepping into their discipline, I think, if you started to tell them what a character's motivations are or how they're supposed to be thinking in different scenes. Actors often can add layers to things that the screenwriters themselves didn't know were there. That's a different discipline, and it's what they bring to films. Scene descriptions, again, if you're describing something that has to be in the background, somebody will be like, oh, he's described a tree there, okay, we need to go find a tree and put that in the background. Does a tree have to be there, or did somebody just imagine it in their head with a tree, you know? Little things like that. Costumes, props, character descriptions. Character descriptions should be really short, because if somebody's casting somebody, then you're like, oh, he's a tall man with a crooked smile, blah, blah, blah. They'll be like, all right, we need to find a guy with a crooked smile or we're not done casting this thing. Rather than like, middle-aged, black hair. Great. Then we've got some flexibility, right? There has to be a lot of flexibility in this thing. For screenwriting, you can use an app called Scrivener. I use that for writing. It's basically just like a whole bunch of little Word documents that you can rearrange in different orders and so on. And you can dump pictures and videos and all your different research in that, and have open in different windows so that you're looking at a picture while you're writing one scene, and you can easily grab a scene and go, I think that should go at the end, and then you stick it at the end so it goes to the back. So it's a really good first draft tool, Scrivener. Final Draft is the one that most people use for like professional screenplays and stuff, but what I did for this is I opened Word and then I searched to see if they have a screenplay template, and they do. So you just stick it in screenplay template. So if I'm writing a first draft, I just write everything in there, and then I will, you know, scroll over the word and then click character, and it will put all caps in the middle in Courier font, and then I don't need to worry about that. It's already in the format that it needs to be. So here's page one of a really silly short film that I wrote that we could do here called Vampires Anonymous. Because I bumped into Liam, who was here I bumped into Liam at the Halloween party, the SAPS Halloween party, and he said when he came in here it looked like an Alcoholics Anonymous meeting. So he thought it'd be really funny if he sat down and just started being like, oh, the other day like I drank too much whiskey and blah blah blah, and then we were all just like, this is the Survivor Filmmakers Club. So, but then when I said that, he was dressed like a vampire and he had these teeth. So then I thought, okay, Alcoholics Anonymous meeting, I think I've seen that before. If we put our own twist on it, let's make it Vampires Anonymous. Then he can wander in here and be like, I first sucked the blood of a human last week, and we're all just like, are you looking for some sort of Vampires Anonymous club? I don't think that's what this is. I didn't know vampires were a thing. Don't know if we can help you. And then we could use it to promote the club if anyone wanted to show up to something that silly. But this is the first page of it anyway. So fade in, that's like film transitions. Opening would go at the left. The fade in would be like from black, then the image appears out of the blackness. Interior, Stavanger Library, Schiller Verkstedet at day, is an interior shot. That's for shooting people to know if they're, because of course you're not going to shoot the scenes necessarily in the order that they're ultimately going to be in. So if you put interior, then somebody knows, okay, maybe we can do a few interior shots, during the day, or okay, I know what lighting people I need there, because it's not going to be outdoors, and it's, day you would put in case, there's windows in the room and it needs to be daytime outside. All right, we need to film it in the day and indoors. Good to know. Stavanger Library Sheriff, that's the room that we're in. It has to take place here because this is the only room that they give us, and it's the only time that we're all together. So that's why you specify that location. Leo stands at a whiteboard, gesturing to diagrams of a camera and a roast chicken. This is called like a slug line. Sorry, slug line is the top bit. Sorry. Actions. This is what is seen and heard. Character names in caps when introduced. That's what I did. Leo, that's me. You would add voiceover. Leo, it would be Leo VO if you can only hear my voice but you can't see me. It would be OS if I'm off screen. I'm in the room but you can't see me on the camera. It would be continued if I'm still talking and it's on another page so that somebody knows, wait, what's going on here, just for continuity. Yeah, and then in brackets I've got how I should say it enthusiastically. So you see, cameras are a lot like people because you need to feed them or they'll die, except cameras eat batteries. Batteries are like the camera's food. Just rambling nonsense. So that's the dialogue and you see how that's formatted. Then Liam throws the door open. He's wearing plastic vampire teeth. Liam is the new character, so he comes in all caps. Throws because it's going to be a sound, so I capitalise the sound. I've underlined plastic vampire teeth because then I go, need to make sure we've got plastic vampire teeth so that you can do this. So sounds are capitalised, key props can be underlined or capitalised, sometimes neither. I think that if you were writing a spec script and you're going to send that to a Hollywood agent, like I might do with this when I make the feature film version one day, you would try to make sure it's readable, in which case you wouldn't underline or capitalise things if you didn't have to. What else? You would have a front page, you would have page numbers. This is like a spec script. I'll explain the difference between spec and shooting scripts in a bit. And you'd have the end at the end. But that's essentially it. That's just what it looks like. It's pretty simple. I think you've read them before if you've been here, so you get the point. Spec script versus shooting script. Spec scripts are written on spec, which means that if you're like an aspiring screenwriter, you write a screenplay because you want to see if somebody's going to make it and you send it off to your agent, and the format there is not going to have scene numbers and it's not going to have any camera moves like cut to, dissolve to, pan left and so on, because those kind of things are things that a cinematographer or director would decide, and you don't want to, again, impinge upon what is their responsibility. You don't want to tell them they have to pan left unless it's so essential to the story that they have to pan left, but that's really for them to decide. You wouldn't number the scenes because you would number the scenes like in a shooting script, because then you're going to say, all right, 1 to 5 we do a Monday, 6 to 10 we do Tuesday, because they're external, internal, whatever the scene numbers are. Then if anyone's wondering what they can make, I found this list that's really helpful. I posted this to the group. You know me, obviously, stuff that's really personal to me is important, but it's what I find the most compelling. It's where I think people can be the most original. It's material that they, have permission and authority on. So that's where I would. That's the stuff I found the most compelling. But yeah, what you love, what you hate, fear, believe, value, want, what you know about people who made a difference, discoveries, decisions that made a difference in your life. Write all this down. Oh my god, you'll have so many story ideas. You won't be able to stop. I really love this YouTube channel, D4 Darius. There's some links to it in Stavanger Filmmakers. He has this film which I think is like half an hour long, and it's like 30-day film school it's called. You do one of the exercises every day, and in 30 days you've got essentially the very basics of what they would teach you at film school. So once you've done a few sound exercises, you understand the principles of like photography, composition. He suggests you just get another friend and you shoot a scene. Hey, how long do we have? All night. Okay. Do a different intonation. See what different meanings you can get out of just that, because it's quite vague. And then you can see how acting decisions can change in tension. Maybe you can shoot it outside, inside. You can do a comedy version. You can dress yourself up, whatever it is. Yeah, loads of things with any meaning you want. Expect lighting and sound to suck. Focused on camera settings, framing, composition, camera angles. Way ahead of you. You know, we went for that. I have so many notes about films that we can make. If anyone wants to start, I mean, like ultimately what I wanted with this is that we get into different groups, and there are several different filmmakers, and we make our own little films, and then we show them to one another, and then we learn from them. I think that would be the best use of this time. Actually, I don't know if I knew that before I set up this filmmaking club. I just kind of learned it along the way, I've just been learning along the way the whole time. I continue to do that. But I have any number of questions that I would like to know people's different answers to, and I would like to see their artistic interpretations of how they go about answering it through characters and plot and so on. Has anyone ever tried to get YouTube famous? Would they ever? Would they not? I wrote this one down. While giving a presentation, a man's whole life unravels and he has a nervous breakdown. Oh God, I just can't remember what inspired that. We also made a very silly thing called the koala interrogation. It was another little thing I made just to show how a dialogue scene would work. You can take that and make your own version, you know, if you wanted. It's really up to you. You can make any number of things. I think that, as you can see with the thing I showed, parts of it were really great. Parts of it could use some work. I was wearing a hat that I shouldn't have worn, and bits were overexposed, and some scenes didn't make sense. But it exists, and I'm going to cut it a little bit, then I'm going to move on and do something else, and it'll be better next time, because that's how we learn. And this is always going to be a kind of environment for people to bring in whatever the hell they're interested in. If it's not the kind of narrative stuff that I'm doing, that's fine. Just show us what you've got. We're going to learn from you too. You can do a day in your life. If you're not comfy yet, come watch film, participate with me. I hope it inspires. Like I say, I've got a thing that could involve everyone in this room if you want to come along. I'd love to have you. Totally up to you. Final thoughts on scripts. Do you know, I'm going to recommend some books as well. There's a whole bunch of books on this stuff. But I think that once you see how well constructed the script is, I think it's impossible for somebody to sit down and just for it to spill out of them. I think most of the time you write something and you go, almost, no, I'll try this again, almost. Actually, I want to show you, I'm going to interrupt this. This is, I basically just write all my short stories in Google Docs. I'm always writing one of them. And this is this is what the script of one of them looks like at the moment. I do it all in blue because I want myself to, I want to understand that I can cut any two words. They're not serious. If I put them in black, I'm like, oh no, that sentence sucks. I think it's really important to be gentle with yourself and to understand that any part of it can change until it's done. And that's like 11,000 words of just disconnected paragraphs, pink bits, ideas of like, I think that, I don't know if there even is an official code. I haven't made one yet, but this is in brackets, it's underlined, it's in pink. It must be very important. Often it's just me kind of going, I think I know what the message of this thing is. It's really important until the thing is done, I think, not to understand what the message is. But at the same time, to write something without understanding what the message is for a really long time can feel like a waste of time unless you're also getting what the message is. So that's really, over time, that's just what's helped me. It's just to make a complete mess. That's what I would advise. Because it's out of that mess that script arises. There's this playwright I really like called Sarah Kane. She made 5 plays in her life, and people asked her like, how do you go about writing a script? She says, I think I just write a whole bunch of rubbish. I'm always surprised when a script emerges. I'm like, where the hell did that come from? I think that most people, good stories are what you discover, not what you know. That's what I think. There's nothing more tedious than reading something that's just exists to show you how clever the author is. There's nothing less artistic than just a bunch of stuff that somebody already knew put on a page. I think that you, like I've tried to do, is you have an inciting question, like would you ever try to get YouTube famous? And then you think, maybe that would be fun, maybe that wouldn't. Let me devise a character who's a little bit like me, let me think of a way that they get YouTube famous, and let me see what happens by revisiting it each day, and let me find out what I think about the answer to that question by seeing how that story turns out. Where the answers come from, I don't know, but if you did sit down and do that, something would come out. It really depends on the type of person you are as well. Like I say, that whole thing I've devised with the blue words and the entire mess is related to who I am as a writer. That seems to be the best thing that's worked over the years that I've done it, is just to get, to always be rewriting until the very last word is down. There are no rules, but there are generally agreed upon principles that should be avoided at your peril, I say. Some people, when they start writing, like me, will go, do you know what, I think I'm a better writer than anyone who needs to have a beginning, middle, end, plot, setting, characterization. And then you just write stuff out, and then slowly you go, do you know what, it seems like all of these things that people have learned from telling stories over the years are because there's really no better way to deliver your ideas clearly and with more emotional impact than in a traditional storytelling format. And there are occasional instances wherein you can forgo that format, but they're so rare that I would look for beginning, middle, end, plot, setting, characterization, all of that in the mix, in the right order and everything. Yeah, and I wouldn't be afraid of other people's genius, right? I wouldn't read something and go, oh, do you know what, that's so amazing, I don't think that I could ever do something like that, so I'm just never going to do anything. In any field, any kind of person you meet, any kind of artistic thing you're doing, I don't care how brilliant somebody is, because my point here is that some people don't even seem to understand how great the thing is that they made. Some people have created something so great that they don't know what it is that's so great and that has captured the imagination. Here's some examples. These are just my suspicions. But Ridley Scott creating all these endless Blade Runner cuts, he's like, he's no longer the authority on why it's such a brilliant film, I think. And some of the edits he's made have been better and some have been worse, but he doesn't know what's going on in this thing that he's made himself, I think. J.K. Rowling, always on Twitter, just being like, oh, this this elf was in this house or whatever, and it's like, now that this set of books that she's created are in the world, she's no longer the only person in control of why it's such a phenomenon. Nobody can if anyone could set out to write a phenomenal set of books like that, there would be an infinite number of them. I think, I don't know that, I don't suppose that she knows 100% why this thing she made is such a phenomenon. So if you read something that you think is so amazing that you could never do something like that, there's a chance that the person who made it doesn't understand why it's so amazing either. It really, I don't know anyone who's a good writer who doesn't think that it is a magical process, and it's something that really you really only learn if you sit down to do it and then you go, I don't know where the hell that idea came from, but I agree with it and I think that's really cool. It's very rare, but you put the work in it. I think anyone could do it. I don't think there's any reason that I'm sitting here telling this to you rather than you being here. That's why I would like to learn from everyone here if possible, because I think that's totally possible. More work and more effort almost always helps, but there's no guarantees that you can do it nor that you could do it again. I think that's why it's intriguing and scary, but I really do believe that that's true. Otherwise every director would make an amazing film every single time. I don't think they do, necessarily. These are some books that helped me, and I brought some stuff here as well actually, that I'll explain. If you're interested in any kind of storytelling, I would start with Stephen King's On Writing. Most people I know like his writing, but the book is really encouraging and it makes it seem so simple. And basically he just sits down every day and writes the next paragraph, I think. I'm not sure he knows where his stories are going. And that works, it totally works if you're that kind of writer. But it's a really encouraging, kind book. Then Bird by Anna Mott is for a similar type of storytelling process, and that's what she says. Take it bird by bird. There's an analogy in the book, essentially. Break it down. Do it one day at a time, do one thing at a time. There's no way that you can make this complex set of stuff that needs to be in a script click together by doing all at once. Break it down. Do the next step. It will all come together eventually. It almost always does. These two are, if you're interested in like screenwriting, William Goldman, he made Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid, The Marathon Man. He's a very famous screenwriter, and his famous line was, "Nobody knows anything. Nobody knows what's going to work and what doesn't." He said it was the most important lesson he'd learned from working in Hollywood. So he tells about his stories there. Robert McKee's story, he has a really in-depth, systematic approach to storytelling that's actually a bit scary, so I wouldn't start there, because after you read that, you won't want to put a word down because you won't believe how much stuff needs to go on for a story to work. But that would be a really advanced one. Art of Memoir by Mary Karr. She's a poet and memoirist, and each chapter in that ends with a list of like 10 rules, and she says, depending on your style and voice, you may need to break 1, 2, or all of these rules in order to write. And I think I really like any kind of storytelling book that admits that there are no set in stone rules, because that's what I believe as well. The Paris Review interviews. The Paris Review is a very famous literary magazine, and the interviews are just with famous authors, but they're really in-depth, and it's really nice to know, to go behind the storytelling process of famous authors that you like. Yours to Tell by Steve Tem and Melanie Tem is a set of conversations between a husband and wife writing team. Their different thoughts about plots, all the different elements of storytelling. I recommend all of these. Then you can also look at my podcast every week. I interview a writer that I like, I just Skype with them, and then I interview them with this, and I learn something from them. Really, you're never done learning with any kind of discipline. I mean, if you look at directors and writers who are still doing it in their 80s and 90s, it's because they haven't cracked it yet. You would always be learning something like this. Any discipline that's of interest to an adult cannot be completely known. It's always going to be a little bit mysterious, there's always going to be something compelling about it. There's always going to be a chance that it won't work out, Otherwise, why would you do it? Aphotic Realm is a literary magazine. I've written a bunch of blog posts about writing that goes a bit more in depth about how I write, if you want to do that. Scriptsblog.com that I already said. The Puffy Chair is a film that anyone can lend or just take. It was made for, I think, $10,000. That was borrowed from the director's parents, and it stars 3 people, and it was made on a digital camera, and then it went into a big festival, and they were rich and famous happily ever after for the most part. It's gotten way more competitive now that people all have, HD quality phones in their pocket. But such things are possible, and they are just done by people who are making things that they are passionate about, and being creative about how they fund things. Then what else did I bring? This one is a series of interviews with horror, science fiction writers and filmmakers. That's quite interesting. And this one is by Roger Corman. I've never seen... I did actually watch a Roger Corman film after reading this one. It's How I Made 100 Movies in Hollywood and Never Lost a Dime. He had less experience as a director than I do now, having made that. And he made 100 films just by doing it. And he would get the budget for a set, and then he would make a film on that set, and then there would be 2 days before they were scheduled to deconstruct the set. So he would call one of his friends and go, "Get me a script, we're going to use this same set and make a second film in 2 days." And then that's what they would do. So he made 100 films that way. But basically, I wouldn't worry about your experience or lack thereof if you just have a just get it done mentality, which is what we did. I didn't know that I could dance by the harbour, in a furry coat, and actually was nervous about it, but actually when the camera was on it was easier because I got to think about myself playing a character. But I had no idea if I could do that before I did it that day, because like I always say, the idea that I'm sitting here in front of a class of people that of my own invention, if you knew me 2 years ago, you'd be like, "We would never do that." So I'm living proof that it can be done. If you just go, "Hey, I'm going to see what I'm capable of," it's way more than than you once might have thought, and what a lovely thing that is to discover. Or Modesta here, our actress in one of our short films, did an amazing job as well. So, yeah, I want to see what you're capable of, and experience really counts for. I mean, because you'll always be learning. The experience that you have now is the best place to start, I think, to do whatever the hell you're interested in. So this is quite a contentious point, but I really believe this. While there's overlap with other disciplines, screenwriting is primarily about writing scripts. Somebody who has seen a lot of films would make a great media historian. If you've seen a lot of films, great, there's a good chance that you can write a script, but you're going to learn more about writing scripts by writing scripts. I think that having experienced a lot of media doesn't necessarily make you the best writer. That's my only thing I take away from that. I feel like sometimes I see people making references in stories and it's almost like they're saying, you should respect me as a writer because I've read all these books. Probably, but not necessarily. The best way to become a better screenwriter, more than any course you could take, is to write one. I think that's quite powerful. I definitely think that's true. But imagine that, you could just sit at home and learn from yourself. And I think when you do that, it's more organic and you're more likely to write what you are supposed to write. Rather than trying to please a market or thinking about a formula or whatever it is, just going, this interests me and I'm going to follow what interests me, and that passion is always far more compelling than anything. Why do people end up burying themselves in different things rather than just doing the thing they want to do? I think we all know the answer to that, I suppose. But exposing your ideas, imagination, thoughts is really scary, and I think it's never scarier than when you get started. I think starting anything is the hardest part about it, and I think it gets easier after that because you get more skills, and then suddenly you notice that people are encouraging or kind about it and aren't as obsessed with what you see as flaws. Because hardly anything is in reality all that bad. That's what I think. Just if this is something you're interested in, do it in manageable steps at your own pace and in ways that interest you. Do what you can with what you have. That's what I say. That's the whole ethos of this club, because that's what I did. We all met in a bar before I even had permission to be here. Then we got the attention of SAPs. I didn't know this was a possibility. I didn't know we'd be doing it here, but here we are doing it. Just get started at whatever you're interested in. I'm sure you would inspire all of us here as well. We can inspire one another. And the confession, that short story I showed you, I spent less time on it than I did making this presentation, so do as I say, not as I do. Wouldn't copy me. Now I'm more known as amateur screenwriting coach than I am a short story writer, and that, whoops. If you're sat here wondering, is anyone going to come and give you more help? Is anyone going to ever notice your efforts? Will it ever work out, whatever the hell that means? When will you have put in enough work to feel comfy enough to call yourself a filmmaker, feel like you can do this work and talk about it with authority? Why should you bother when there's so many talented people in the world and your work would be terrible, definitely at first, maybe even always? Is there any point to this at all? Congratulations, you're definitely an artist. That's how we all think. I feel a little bit like a fraud sitting here right now doing this. It's fine. That feeling may never go away, but you can make the work you want while you've got that feeling. It comes and goes in waves. I don't think it stops, but if you're worried about it, it's because you care about it. So if you are worried about something, I think it's a sign that you have deep interest in it and should pursue whatever it is. I know so many people who are obsessed, like I say, I started as a writer, and I know so many people who are obsessed with the idea of being a real writer and understanding what a real writer does, and pointing out other writers they know that are not real writers. And it's nonsense. It's a term that they've invented, and it's a silly game that they all play with one another that is meaningless, ultimately. You're all writers if you want to be. It doesn't bother me. There's no such thing as a real writer. There's no such thing as a real filmmaker, I think, other than somebody who is vaguely interested in filmmaking. I think if you can just get over this idea of having to apply some sort of name to yourself, you can just go ahead and do what you were interested in without worrying about what kind of authority you're supposed to have. And maybe I've thrown a lot of information at you, but what is art if not people just expressing themselves? And who knows how to do that better than you do? You all know how to express yourself better than anyone knows how to express yourself. I've got this silly story that's throwing your shoe in the window. So when we were younger, my sister sometimes would come home from school and she forgot her keys, and then she would realise that she couldn't get in the house. But she was going to be freezing because my mum wouldn't come back for like 2 hours or so. So she was like, what am I going to do? I can't get in the house. So she would, from the outside, open the living room window, take her shoe off and throw it in the window. Then she was like, well, I definitely need to get in the house now because I've got no shoes. Then she would have to climb up the drain pipe and get in, I think, through one of the top windows. But my point is, if you find a way to force yourself to start something, you'll have to get it done, even if it seems impossible, you know? So Robertsons, we're people who throw shoes in windows. If you're having any of these thoughts of doubt, and if this is something that's interesting to you, go create something or start plotting something you're going to create. There's nothing that will feel better or more meaningful than just doing something. Cheers!